Coming up first is Bhutan. Bhutan is a tiny country in Southeast Asia, and it has pretty much nothing when it comes to defense. Their army is only 7,000 personnel, and their air force consists of just 2 aircrafts. They also have 0 tanks, but despite all of this, Bhutan is nearly impossible to invade. For thousands of years, no country has ever tried. You see, Bhutan is a tiny country surrounded by Himalayan peaks. The country itself is 300 meters above sea level, so if an enemy country wanted to invade, it would need to reach the border, which is hard to do. It would somehow need to get across all of these gigantic Himalayan peaks. And even when they got there, they would have incredible altitude sickness. The people of Bhutan are acclimatized to this, so they don't feel any sickness. But if you suddenly soared to that height, then you would. You would feel absolutely exhausted and sick too. All of an enemy country's resources would be spent actually trying to get to the country. Also, Bhutan is fairly insignificant when it comes to international geopolitics. They're very self-sufficient and they love peace. They're incredibly isolated physically and politically. North Korea. You hear rumblings about North Korea all the time. They are currently developing nuclear missiles, and they also don't have a central banking system. Some argue this makes them a prime target for an invasion, but despite it being a small and poor country, it would be nearly impossible to invade. You see, despite the size of the country, it is the 4th largest military in the world. This is behind China, India, and the USA. They have 1.28 million active military personnel, and they've also got 4.5 million in reserves. They are equipped with 4,200 tanks, 500 fighter planes, nearly 1,000 battleships, and so far 8 nuclear warheads. These nukes are enough to scare off even the most powerful of countries. In the 1950s, during the Korean War, South Korea and the USA teamed up to try and subdue North Korea. But even back then, with South Korea and the USA teaming up, they couldn't do it. Not only that, North Korea has a great friendship with China. The USA would never want to spoil their relationship with China, so they would never invade North Korea. Australia. Australia is not the biggest country when it comes to population. But one of Australia's biggest defences from invaders is its geography. Australia is an island, and 70% of it is uninhabitable outback. This is a gigantic stretch of desert. This would make it very hard for an enemy army to acclimatise. Its nearest potential enemy is Japan, but even that is 11,000 kilometers away, and forces would need to cross the Pacific Ocean to invade. Japan nearly did invade Australia during World War II, but once they realised how difficult it would be, they stopped. By the time they got into the country and had crossed the outback, the soldiers would be so weak and subdued. This would mean it would be easy for the Australian military to take them out. United States. The United States has the 3rd biggest active personnel behind China and India. The USA have been major players in wars, for example World War I and World War II, and they've also been a part of recent invasions, for example in Iraq and Afghanistan. They also have the largest military budget of any country in the world. That is nearly $750 billion a year. Not only that, in the USA many citizens possess weapons. There are 112 guns in the USA per every 100 person. That's way more guns than people. This means that if anyone tried to invade, citizens may be able to fight them back. The USA is also gigantic. There are many different terrains, for example deserts and also rocky mountains. It's also separated from other superpower countries by gigantic oceans. For example, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Switzerland. Switzerland is known as the most peaceful country in the world. They were one of the only countries in Europe to stay out of World War I and World War II. But despite this, it's one of the most powerful countries in the world. Superpowers like the UK, the USA, France and Germany all have a lot of money stored in Swiss banks. So if they tried to invade Switzerland, Switzerland could simply take all of their money. Switzerland's geography is also great for defense. They have alpine mountains surrounding the country. They also have 24/7 army surveillance of these mountains from hidden bunkers inside them. And the Swiss army are so good, they're even trusted to protect the Pope. Russia. Russia is the largest country on Earth, and this is a great defense for invaders. One of the main reasons why Germany lost World War II was because they could not conquer Russia. All of the German soldiers simply froze in the cold climate of Russia. By the time any invaders actually got into Russia, they would be easy to subdue. That's because they would have wasted so many men and resources simply getting into the country. Russia also has nearly 1 million active personnel. They have 3,500 military aircraft. and the most nukes out of any other country, 7,000 missiles. You can see why no one wants to go up against that. United Kingdom. One European country which did not get invaded in World War II was the UK. This is mainly because it's an island which is hard to invade. Also, despite being so small, the UK is incredibly powerful on the world stage. It's a superpower like the USA, Russia or Germany. The only way you could invade is by a naval invasion through the English Channel. You'd have to go through the treacherous waters and then get up the White Cliffs of Dover. Even Germany in World War II could not do that. The UK also has 150,000 active military personnel, and they spend $55 billion on defense every year. The UK also has a quote special relationship with the USA thanks to the NATO agreement. This means if anyone was to invade Britain, then NATO would come and help out. India. India is one of the largest countries in the world, and they also have the second largest active personnel. That is 1.5 million people. India also has a massive military might. It has 2,000 aircrafts and over 600 helicopters. They have 6,000 tanks and 7,000 armoured fighting vehicles. They also have 14 submarines and 2 aircraft carriers. India also has a great relationship with China. This means if any country, for example Pakistan, tried to invade, they likely couldn't. That's because China, which is right above India, would probably help out. China. Let's look at the largest country in the world when it comes to population. China have the most active personnel with over 2 million people. It's also an incredibly large country which would be hard to get into. China have around 3,000 military aircraft and 800 helicopters. They also have more tanks than almost anyone, 9,500. They have 5,000 armoured fighting vehicles, and also 68 submarines and 1 aircraft carrier. Japan. Japan is an island nation which is hard to invade. They also have 250,000 people in their active personnel. They've got 800 tanks, 300 air fighters and 750 helicopters. Also, being an island nation, they have a big naval strength. This includes 17 submarines and 4 aircraft carriers. Their annual defense budget is around $50 billion. That is the 6th highest in the entire world. They're also known for being incredibly tough. During the USA, America was so scared of Japan they had to drop 2 nuclear bombs on the country. That is because the word surrender is not within the Japanese soldiers' vocabulary. The most secret military experiments caught on tape. Merman. We're all aware of the mythical creatures, mermaids. It's a concept which is entirely fictional, right? In 2015, an incredible video was caught in Poland. It showed military professionals in biohazard suits. They were dressed in luminous green and also white. They can be seen pulling a mysterious creature from a lake. They then put it on a stretcher and take it away. The footage is only 2 minutes long, was caught by a bystander. As you can see, this is not a human being. What appears to be a large fishtail is clearly visible. The creature looks like a hybrid of a man and a mermaid. Some say this was some kind of experiment, crossing human and fish. People did contact the Polish military, but they said they knew nothing of the video. Since this was caught in 2015, no one's heard anything of the incident since. Some hypothesized this could be part of a movie, but there were no cameras or crew around. And in the 5 years since this was taped, no film like this has come out. Sonic boom. This footage was caught in 2007. An amateur cameraman took this in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. As you can see, an incredibly fast-moving military jet appears to pass by. But then something unbelievable happens. A smoky black circle forms on the back of the plane. This footage was uploaded to the internet, and people quickly identified this plane as an F-18 Super Hornet. This footage was caught before this variant of the plane was released. F-18s have been flying since 1995, but this new model was created in 2010. This means the footage must have been of a secret test of the Super Hornet. But what was the circle of black smoke coming from the plane? Well, it's known as a sonic boom, which is basically a shockwave. This happens when an object travels faster than the speed of sound. This creates an enormous amount of sound energy similar to an explosion. Of course, this is now public information and Super Hornets are used around the world. But back then, this had not yet been released. Operation Sea Spray. Operation Sea Spray is also known as Operation LAC. It took place by the US Navy in the 1950s. They wanted to study the behavior of bacterial clouds on San Francisco. So 50 gallons of biological stimulant were secretly sprayed offshore. This was made with very harmful chemicals. For example, Serratia marcescens. Over 800,000 residents of San Francisco were exposed, and it's believed that at least one person passed away due to the experiment. They later followed this operation up with something called Operation Large Area. In this experiment, tons of zinc cadmium sulfide was sprayed over the Midwest. It's a popular theory now that planes emit chemicals into the sky. It sounds like a crazy theory, but as this experiment shows, the US government did actually do this in the 1950s. During Operation Large Area, the zinc cadmium sulfide was mixed with radioactive materials. This was then released over the skies of US cities. One researcher also claimed that the spray contained radium-226. This is a highly radioactive isotope, and if exposed, humans can get very sick and sometimes even pass away. However, army documents related to this remain classified. Operation Vegetarian. Porton Down is the UK's most secretive and controversial military research site. It's known for its research on bioweapons and chemical weapons. In 1942, scientists from Porton Down went to Grunard Island. This was to conduct a secret bioweapon test. 80 sheep were taken to the unpopulated island. The sheep were to be used as test subjects for a dangerous strain of anthrax. This is known as Volum 14578. The spores were loaded into explosive and placed on tall poles near the sheep. The devices, when detonated, caused an aerosol cloud. This then drifted towards the sheep. Within days, the sheep succumbed to the germs and passed on. They were then carried away by hazmat suit-wearing scientists and taken to incinerators. Following the successful test, 5 million anthrax cakes were made. The UK military wanted to put these in German cities, making them uninhabitable. But this plan never went ahead. Operation Teapot. Operation Teapot was a series of 14 nuclear tests. These were conducted in 1955 in Nevada, USA. The largest nuke they tested was a 43 kiloton warhead named Linda. Linda was detonated at the top of a 500-foot tower. This was to study the directional airburst of a large blast on the ground. They wanted to see how a small-scale tactical nuke could be used on a conventional battlefield. The footage is extraordinary, and if you went to this area in Nevada today, it would still be radioactive. The range of this massive cloud reached a height of 20,000 feet, and blast remnants flew 60 miles away. Project Dork. We've already seen that the US Army conducts tests on the public, but it's not just the public who are used as human guinea pigs, their own soldiers are too. From 1948 to 1975, the US Army conducted secret chemical tests. The subjects for these tests were 7,000 soldiers and 1,000 civilians. This took place at the Edgewood Arsenal. They wanted to investigate incapacitating agents. If successful, they wanted to use these as a form of psychochemical warfare against the Soviet Union. Over 250 chemical compounds, including BZ and LSD, were tested on unwitting subjects. And while these tests were going ahead, their reactions were filmed. People experienced mental disturbances, hallucinations, and loss of self-control. In 1975, US Congress discovered it was using human beings as guinea pigs, and they promptly shut it down. Operation Tunnels. During the 1970s, the US military were desperately trying to defeat the Viet Cong. One difficulty was the Viet Cong were great at hiding, so that's why they explored chemical options to try and make the Viet Cong come out of hiding. They experimented with CS riot gas. In tests, volunteer US soldiers were locked inside a sealed chamber. Then, when they were inside, the CS gas was turned on. The soldiers were not made aware of this gas, but were told it was safe. They also tested these out in the field to see how well they would go down underground tunnels. Although they told test subjects it was all safe, it was later proved this was a lie. Inhalation of this gas can cause significant damage to the lungs. Operation Cauldron. After the Second World War, Porton Down continued making bioweapons for the British Navy. They launched Operation Cauldron. This was to test the effects of a weaponized plague. They did this on nearly 4,000 guinea pigs and 80 monkeys. They put animals in cages on a boat, and they floated this off the coast of the Isle of Lewis in Scotland. Then, scientists released clouds of pneumonic and bubonic plague. After the animals were exposed to this, they were taken aboard a support vessel. None of the animals survived this test, and that's why the scientists thought it was a success. But they later discovered civilians had accidentally come into contact with the cloud. But thankfully they had no ill effects, meaning their test failed. If their test didn't fail, this blunder could have caused pneumonic and bubonic plague to be released across the entire world. Secret spy plane. In 2014, some aviation enthusiasts were in Amarillo, Texas. There are lots of military aircraft tests coming from Area 51 and also other Air Force bases in Texas. This includes Amarillo Air Force Base. But in 2014, one group of people caught 3 aircrafts they'd never seen before. They dubbed these Flying Doritos. Some thought it was a B-2 stealth bomber, but as you can see, the back edge is flat. No one is sure what these are, and the Air Force refused to disclose anything about them. The most expensive military machines. Coming up first, we have P-8A Poseidon. Poseidon was the Greek god of the sea, but I think even this Greek god would have a tough time fighting the P-8A Poseidon. The total cost of this program is $33 billion. Now, this plane is supposed to be a surveillance plane, but don't let that harmless description fool you. It comes jam-packed with mines, missiles, and torpedoes. In fact, there are so many weapons inside it that the original wings of this plane had to be changed as they weren't heavy enough. Of course, this plane also has cameras that can see through anything. Really, these heat-seeking cameras can see bodies even when they're underground. The plane is gigantic and is 3 times the size of a normal commercial plane. It also has Harpoon anti-ship missiles. These are missiles that can be launched at expensive naval machines. Next up is Talos. We all love the Iron Man movies, and I'm sure many of us have wished we could have our very own Iron Man suit. Well, if you join the United States Special Operations Command Force, you may be able to get one. That's because some soldiers in that force have what's known as a Talos. Talos stands for Tactical Assault Light Operator Suit, and it's basically a robotic exoskeleton developed by the US Army. The suit comes with many advantages, for example, super strength. And I really mean that. The impact of any load is distributed throughout your entire body's weight. This means you can carry more things than ever before. There are also night vision and infrared goggles built into the suit. And in the helmet, there's also a headset and microphone. And there's even a virtual reality sensor built in, so you can see how a mission's going to look before really doing it. The program is said to cost around $80 million, and that's only for a few suits. But apparently in the future, the USA will spend $20 million per year developing this program. Next up is AMX-56 Leclerc. The AMX-56 is the most expensive tank in the world. The tank was a collaboration between the Army of France and the United Arab Emirates. Each tank will set you back $28 million. And it was named after a French WW2 general. The tank has a 12-meter cannon which can muster 40 rounds. There's also an 8-meter machine gun that can shoot off 3,000 rounds. And the tank can drive at max speeds of 45 miles per hour. That may not sound like much, but for a tank, that's crazy fast. Next up is Trident II. We all know about the Trident missiles. They're very controversial as they're so powerful, but they're used in the USA and the UK. The missile is a ballistic target which can be launched from a submarine. It goes at speeds of 13,000 miles per hour. And it's also never been used because it's armed with nuclear warheads. This means if they were ever to be used, we would be in a state of nuclear war. The USA and UK have spent a combined $60 billion on this system, and if it's ever used anywhere near the country you live in, then you'll be wiped out. As you can see on this map, if this missile hit the middle of the USA, here's how you would be affected. Basically what I'm showing here is the range of this very powerful missile. Next up is Super Hornet. The FA-18EF Super Hornet is one of the best planes in the whole USA Air Force. Many of these are stationed on aircraft carriers around the world. The plane's equipped with a 2-meter cannon which can fire at any plane or boat. There's also encompassing air-to-air missiles and air-to-ground missiles, and even super accurate laser-guided missiles. Just one of these can cost around $80 million. And right now the USA has around 650 of these. Next up is JLTV. JLTV stands for a Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. Basically, this is the most powerful and tough car you will ever see. The program has cost around $2 billion. And this vehicle is stronger, faster, and lighter than a Humvee. The trucks weigh around 14,000 pounds each. They can go on the snow thanks to the chains on their tires. And they're also blast and bulletproof. It goes at a top speed of 70 miles an hour, which is super fast, and it can be used as a utility vehicle, a shelter, or an ambulance. And if you think Lamborghinis cost a lot, just one of these cars costs $500,000. Next up is CVN-78 Carrier. This is probably the biggest piece of machinery on this list, and that's because it's an aircraft carrier. Just one of these cost $10 billion, and it's actually the single most expensive military weapon in the world. Right now there's only 3 in the world, as the cost is so much. The total size measures around 4.5 acres, and it weighs more than 100,000 tons. It can house more than 75 aircraft, and it also has gigantic Sea Sparrow missiles throughout. Next up is Arleigh Burke DDG-51 Destroyer. This is the most expensive Navy ship in the world. In fact, one of these cost $2 billion. But the total cost of this program has been over $100 billion. This ship is much more maneuverable than other warships as it's small and fast, and it was actually made to protect bigger ships from missiles. That's why this ship has lots of anti-aircraft missiles on it. It also has guided missiles and anti-surface missiles, and for strategic purposes, Tomahawk missiles too. There's also a 5-inch cannon which can fire torpedoes and also a mine detector on board as well. All of these functions means it can be used in many roles, and it's also said to be a favorite of US Navy commanders. Next up is F-35 Lightning II. This aircraft is infamous for how much it's been costing. It's expected that soon the USA will have spent $1.5 trillion on this aircraft. This is because they've been using them for about 5.5 decades. And they've also bought so many of them as they're said to be so effective. F-35s can fulfill many roles because they're very stealthy. They can reach supersonic speeds and have stealth sensors built in. One single F-35 Lightning II can cost $100 million, and it can go at a top speed of 1.6 Mach, which converts to 1,200 miles per hour. The planes are actually so fast that when they're in the air flying at top speeds, you can't see them with the human eye. And finally on the list, we have Virginia-class submarine. This naval submarine cost $89 billion. That's for the entire program cost, and the US Navy have many of these. It's a nuclear-powered submarine which is meant for firing missiles at targets. It can operate near to shores as well as in the open ocean, and it comes with a wide range of very scary add-ons. These include mines, torpedoes, and Tomahawk missiles. If we ever have a WW3, expect to see many of these out on the open sea. India vs Pakistan 2020 military army comparison. So first off, let's look at the two countries. India is one of the largest countries in the world, with the second largest population after China. The capital is New Delhi, and it's a very strong country. Then, northwest of India is Pakistan. The capital of Pakistan is Islamabad, and it's also a very, very big country. But it's nowhere near as big as India. India's population will be at 1.3 billion in 2020, whereas the population of Pakistan will be around 200 million. Of course, meaning India has 1.1 billion more people than Pakistan. India is also much larger when it comes to land, being 3.3 million kilometers squared. Pakistan is about 800,000 kilometers squared. And when it comes to militaries, size matters. The military budget of India is $55.9 billion. This is around 2.5% of their GDP, but Pakistan actually invests more of their GDP into their military. They put in 2.9% of their GDP, and this rounds up to about $10.8 billion. In India, there's no conscription into the army. This means that you're not forced into it. But if you're 16 to 18 years old, you can sign up for voluntary military service. Women may also join India's military, but only for non-combat roles. Pakistan is the same when it comes to not having conscription. If you're 16 to 23 years old, you can volunteer for the military service. The Pakistan Air Force and Navy also have female pilots and sailors. And you can even become an Air Force technician at the age of just 15. So now let's look at the military manpower of these two countries. India have an active personnel of 2.14 million people. These are people who are actively in the army fighting. But they also have a reserve personnel of 1.1 million. These are people who can be brought out if they ever need more soldiers. And India also have an available 319 million additional people who are ready for the military if needed. Despite Pakistan being much smaller than India, they have very impressive military numbers. They have nearly 700,000 active personnel and reserves of 500,000 people. They also have another 50 million people available for the military. But as Al Jazeera says, despite its larger army, the capability of India's conventional forces is limited. This is due to inadequate logistics, maintenance, and shortages of ammo and spare parts. But now let's look up to the skies and analyze their air forces. India has a total of 2,216 aircrafts in their air force. This is made up of 323 fighter jets. They also have 329 multi-role aircraft, 220 attack aircraft, and 725 helicopters. Now, this may sound like a lot, but many officials are concerned India does not have enough fighter jets. Pakistan has a total of 1,143 aircraft. This is made up of 186 fighter aircraft, 225 multi-role aircraft, 90 attack aircrafts, and 323 helicopters. So despite India being way larger than Pakistan, it has less than double their air force. Pakistan has 7 airborne early warning and control aircraft, which is 3 more than India has. And Pakistan is continuing to modernize its inventory and improve its precision strike and ISR. But now let's go back down to the ground and check out the land forces of these armies. When it comes to land forces, both countries are very strong. India has 4,426 tanks. They also have 5,681 armored fighting vehicles. And when it comes to their artillery, meaning weapons built to launch munitions, that makes up 5,067. 290 of these are self-propelled artillery, and 292 are rocket artillery. Now, when it comes to Pakistan, they have less tanks. They actually have 2,735, but they do have lots of armored fighting vehicles, 3,066 to be exact. And they also have a very impressive artillery of 3,745. 325 of these are self-propelled artillery, and 134 of these are rocket artillery. But one crucial part of these countries is protecting their seas. That's because one way to get between them is by crossing via the sea. So let's look in on the naval capacity of India and Pakistan. Surprisingly, despite them being a smaller country, Pakistan has more of a navy than India. But India's navy is more varied. The number of India's naval is 214. This is made up of 2 aircraft carriers, 11 destroyer warships, 15 frigates, 24 corvettes, and 15 submarines. When it comes to Pakistan, their naval is bigger at 231, but unlike India, they have no aircraft carriers and no warship destroyers. They also have 0 corvettes, but they do have 9 frigates and 5 submarines. But as many people point out, a lot of these don't matter too much. Remember, if we have World War III, it may get nuclear. And if that happens, then no amount of soldiers could ever stop a nuclear weapon. So let's check out the nuclear capacity of India and Pakistan. Well, when it comes to India, things are kind of complicated. Officially, India says they don't have any nuclear weapons. But recent estimates suggest India has 130 to 140 nuclear weapons. And apparently they've produced enough weapons-grade plutonium to make up to 150 to 200 nukes. And they've produced enough weapons-grade plutonium for up to 150 to 200 nukes. But what about Pakistan? Well, they're one of the few countries not part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. However, it's believed that the government does have nuclear warheads. It's estimated that Pakistan has 90 to 100 nukes. But when it comes to nuclear weapons, everything is very secretive, so we can't say the exact number. So there we go, that's how these two countries' militaries and armies compare. Of course, India's is a lot bigger. But remember, Pakistan and India both have nukes. And because the countries are so close to each other, if any one country used these, it would be a loss for both countries. So let's hope in 2020 World War III does not take place. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.